In a world where economic borders once seemed to vanish, where trade between the United States, Canada, and Mexico stood as a pillar of stability, a shocking political earthquake has shattered decades of trust. Like the Three Musketeers of North American trade, these nations had built an alliance rooted in shared prosperity, assembling cars together, exporting steel, and even arguing over who brewed the best beer. But now something has gone terribly wrong. This is not just another trade dispute, it's a dramatic shift that could redefine America's future and its place in global power. Welcome to Global Analysis, where we peel back the curtain on the forces reshaping our world. It all erupted in August 2025, when President Donald Trump unleashed a thunderclap across North America. With a sweeping announcement, he imposed aggressive tariffs up to 25% on key imports, including steel, automobiles, and agricultural goods, targeting not China or Europe, but America's closest neighbors, Canada and Mexico. The White House declared it a bold move to bring jobs back to American soil and secure economic independence. But behind the patriotic slogans, the reality unfolded like a slow-motion train wreck. Instead of reviving industries, the tariffs triggered a tit-for-tat retaliation that fractured the very alliance that had kept North America strong. For decades, the USMCA trade pact symbolized cooperation and shared growth. But under this new policy, trust evaporated. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum and Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney struck back not with bombs or rhetoric, but with something far more strategic: a historic trade realignment that bypasses the United States entirely. In a dramatic press conference, Sheinbaum and Carney announced the creation of the Northern Corridor, a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure project designed to reroute supply chains and logistics. This corridor directly connects Mexico's booming electric vehicle and battery factories with Canada's Pacific ports, eliminating the need for U.S. customs and ports altogether. With a $2.3 billion investment to upgrade Canada's Pacific Short Link rail system, this plan isn't just a workaround, it's a declaration of independence from Washington's economic grip. The numbers are staggering. This shift diverts nearly $120 billion in trade, about 2.8% of the U.S. Midwest's GDP, away from American roots. The U.S. Treasury stands to lose $11 billion annually in logistics revenues and another $3.5 billion in customs fees. To make matters worse, Mexico and Canada are introducing blockchain-based customs systems, eliminating the bureaucratic bottlenecks that once funneled trade through U.S. checkpoints. The ripple effect has been devastating for American communities. In Michigan, businesses that once thrived on Canadian tourism now report a 33% drop in visitors. U.S. agricultural exports to Canada plunged by 8.5% in 2025, leaving corn and soybean farmers in Minnesota and Iowa scrambling to find buyers. Canadian supermarkets, once stocked with American produce, now boast Buy Local campaigns featuring Ontario-grown corn and Manitoba soy. One Manitoba farmer summed it up perfectly. "We're not just planting crops, we're planting independence." Meanwhile, the American automotive sector, once a cornerstone of USMCA cooperation, is collapsing under the weight of these tariffs. Ford's factories in Louisville and Ohio have been forced to shut down production lines due to shortages of rare earth magnets essential for electric vehicle EV systems. General Motors is facing similar struggles with its Warren truck assembly plant cutting shifts and considering temporary closures. These shutdowns have led to thousands of layoffs, crippling communities that depend on these jobs for survival. Detroit, once the proud heart of America's automotive industry, now feels like a steel graveyard, silent and abandoned. Mexico and Canada, on the other hand, have capitalized on the turmoil. With the Northern Corridor in motion, both nations are ramping up production of 360,000 EV units annually in their own factories, redirecting what used to flow through U.S. plants. This not only strengthens their economies, but also positions them as leaders in the fast-growing green technology sector, leaving American automakers struggling to compete. In Ohio alone, auto parts suppliers have reported a 15% drop in contracts, forcing layoffs and partial closures that ripple through the local economy. Canada's response has been particularly strategic. Rather than engaging in a tariff war, Prime Minister Mark Carney has doubled down on self-sufficiency. His government has invested over $1 billion CAD to fortify national supply chains, particularly in the steel industry. by capping steel imports from non-USMCA nations to 50% of 2024 levels, and imposing a 50% tariff on any excess. Canada is not just shielding domestic jobs, it is reshaping itself as a hub for clean steel production, crucial for future infrastructure and automotive projects. Canadian business leaders are already feeling the benefits. One Toronto-based auto manufacturer declared Canadian content is replacing American contracts. Our jobs matter again. In addition, green steel initiatives are attracting lucrative European deals from companies eager to meet stringent carbon standards. Mexico mirrors this approach with bold innovations in battery manufacturing and renewable energy investments. Factories in southern Mexico are now shipping EV batteries directly to Canada, bypassing U.S. tariffs and slashing costs. Analysts estimate that by 2028, the Northern Corridor will divert $69 billion in trade annually away from the U.S. Mexico has also secured agreements with the European Union for battery and auto component exports, further reducing reliance on American markets. But beyond the dollars and cents, this crisis has shattered something far more valuable: trust. For decades, USMCA was a beacon of North American cooperation. Today, that trust is fractured. Canada and Mexico are not just avoiding tariffs. They are actively building a future where Washington's unpredictability no longer dictates their economic survival. Across the Atlantic, Europe is following suit. Facing 30% U.S. tariffs on their exports, EU leaders unveiled a $93 billion plan to strike back, targeting American products from Boeing aircraft to Kentucky bourbon. At the same time, Canada has begun restricting exports of strategic minerals like uranium and copper to the U.S., warning that if tariffs are used as weapons, they will control the ammunition. This mineral chokehold is hitting America's energy sector hard. Nuclear power plants and renewable energy projects, which depend heavily on Canadian uranium and copper, are now facing critical shortages. The Biden administration's attempts to source these materials from alternative suppliers have proven costly and inefficient, pushing energy prices higher for ordinary Americans. On the streets of the Midwest, the consequences of these policies are impossible to ignore. Inflation is creeping up steadily. Consumer prices rose by 2.7% in June 2025, up from 2.4% just a month earlier. Grocery bills are swelling, gas prices are soaring, and electricity costs are biting into household budgets. Retirees who once rallied behind the America First trade agenda now feel betrayed, not by foreign adversaries, but by policies that promised jobs yet delivered shuttered factories and economic despair. In small industrial towns, community food banks are overwhelmed. Lines stretch for blocks as laid-off workers seek assistance. In Michigan, one former assembly line worker expressed the growing frustration. They told us tariffs would bring jobs back. All I see are higher prices and silent production lines. This sentiment is echoed across the Rust Belt, where decades of hard-earned manufacturing progress are unraveling under protectionist policies that have backfired spectacularly. While Washington celebrates a reported $550 billion in tariff revenues, these figures mask the human toll. Lost wages, canceled shifts, and collapsing communities cannot be offset by government coffers swelling with tax dollars. The economic vacuum created by these policies is being filled rapidly, just not by the United States. Instead, Mexico and Canada are stepping into the void with a bold, forward-looking vision, a green, efficient, and self-sustaining trade network that redefines North American commerce. This Northern Corridor is not just a bypass, it's a blueprint for a post-USMCA era, one where sustainability and technological innovation outpace Washington's outdated economic warfare. Europe is moving in the same direction, striking green trade deals and aligning with nations that prioritize environmental standards over political brinkmanship. For Canada and Mexico, this shift opens doors to lucrative global markets that increasingly view sustainability as a prerequisite for trade. Meanwhile, American companies weighed down by tariffs and uncertainty struggle to adapt. The stark reality is that the United States, once the undisputed leader of North American trade, risks becoming a mere spectator in a game it used to dominate. The Northern Corridor symbolizes more than diverted trade routes. It embodies a new power dynamic where allies choose autonomy over dependence, and where trust once broken is not easily repaired. The greatest danger to American influence isn't the immediate loss of revenue or jobs, it's the erosion of credibility. Allies no longer see the U.S. as a stable partner. They see an unpredictable neighbor weaponizing tariffs and fracturing decades of cooperation. History shows that great powers rarely fall because of higher prices alone. They decline when their outstretched hand is no longer trusted. As the world moves toward sustainable interconnected trade networks, Washington appears trapped in the past, clinging to strategies that isolate rather than unite. The Northern Corridor exemplifies this shift, a tangible symbol that Canada and Mexico no longer need the U.S. to thrive. This corridor will soon redirect tens of billions in commerce annually, carving out new supply chains that bypass American ports, roads, and customs entirely. It's a silent revolution happening just beyond U.S. borders, but its economic and political aftershocks are already being felt in every corner of America. Inside the White House, President Trump continues to tout tariffs as a victory, calling them proof that America is winning again. Yet outside the echo chamber of political rallies, economic indicators tell a different story. Manufacturing output has plummeted. Export terminals in Louisiana and Texas are operating at less than half capacity. Entire freight corridors have slowed to a crawl as supply chains reorient away from the U.S. Even Wall Street, initially supportive of protectionist policies, is now flashing warning signals of a looming recession if trade realignments continue unchecked. Meanwhile, Mexico and Canada are forging stronger ties with Europe and Asia, entering multi-billion-dollar agreements to supply electric vehicle batteries, clean steel, and sustainable agricultural goods to global markets. Canada's Pacific ports are expanding to accommodate new shipping routes, while Mexican factories are breaking production records. For every American factory that shutters, a Canadian or Mexican counterpart is stepping in to fill the void. What's even more alarming is the geopolitical message this sends. If America's closest allies can be pushed to build alternatives to U.S. trade dominance, what's stopping other nations from doing the same? Already whispers in diplomatic circles suggest that Europe, Canada, and Mexico are considering a Green Alliance trade bloc, leaving the U.S. excluded from the very economic leadership it once commanded. This is not simply about lost dollars, it's about lost influence. Trade at its core is trust. When nations can no longer rely on predictable partnerships, they build new ones. The Northern Corridor is the embodiment of that reality. A decade ago, the idea that Canada and Mexico would collaborate to bypass American trade infrastructure would have been unthinkable. Today, it's not only real, it's the future. And yet there remains a narrow window for change. Economists argue that if Washington shifts away from punitive tariffs and embraces cooperative, forward-thinking trade policies, the tide can be reversed. Investments in green technology, shared infrastructure projects, and renewed commitments to fair trade could reforge bonds with Canada and Mexico. The question is not whether the U.S. has the capability to lead again, it's whether it has the political will to do so. So where does this leave America? Will it remain a proud architect of North American unity, or watch from the sidelines as former allies chart a course without it? The answer will shape not only the future of trade, but the very identity of the United States on the world stage. What do you think? Can America rebuild the trust it has lost? Or has the Northern Corridor permanently rewritten the rules of North American power? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Global Analysis and share this video if you believe the time to change course is now. Because what's at stake is not just trade policy, but America's place in the world.